Good morning, church. Welcome. It's really good to be with you. Really excited for this morning. I'm really excited to announce publicly that I no longer recognize the Western calendar. My family and I have decided that we're going for Chinese New Year. We're really looking forward to 2021 when it arrives. It's just going to be great. Really anticipating good things from 2021. Luckily, it's not here yet, though, so no reason to be disappointed or anything.
Yeah, I must say I'm also kind of over these days and these lines in the sand that are meant to happen at the turn of a new year. I was horrified just 2 or 3 days into the new year going into the grocery store and seeing Easter eggs everywhere. And then I just kind of thought, time is actually laughing at us.
It's all a fiction. It's not even real.
Totally. Go home saying Happy Easter to my children on the 3rd of January.
Yeah. I mean, Boney M in the shop is welcome at any time of the year, really.
No, it's never welcome. Never.
If you, joking aside, are, I think like most of us, feeling a little blindsided or sort of shell-shocked by the way this year has started. I know many people had kind of scrumpled up the last bit of optimism they had, like 2021, we're just trusting you for good things. And if that was how you approached this year, and then how, potentially this last week or two have broken that hope, we feel that with you. We understand how it can be difficult to kind of get yourself up to go again, especially when the first notes of this new song are a little bit kind of bleak.
Yes, a bit off tune.
Yeah, minor keys. So if that's where you're feeling this morning, if that's where you're coming from, if you're like, actually I just want to go back to bed and hope that this year turns around, then can I invite you to join us in not actually thinking about this year at all, or even thinking about yourself. Church is not about how to appropriately respond to your circumstances all the time. Sometimes that's really helpful, but much more importantly, much more eternally true, is the fact that the glorious God of the universe has eternal plans, has stuff to talk to us about this morning, wants to meet with us. There's a whole other story going on between you and your Maker, and 2021 is a very small part of that. So I don't know about you, Nat, but I'm really looking forward to worshiping with my church this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just remembering that we have a God who's outside of time, but one of his promises about time is that each and every day is a new day. So we don't need to wait for the Chinese New Year or for Easter morning or New Year's morning. We just really have an opportunity now to just engage with our God who says that each and every day can be a new day.
Yeah. So as the guys take their places, would you close your eyes with us? And we're just going to turn our hearts towards our Father. God, we trust you. We still trust you. We still love you. More than ever, we still desire you. We really want to be with you. And so this morning, across the world, across the city, across the country, wherever we're gathered from, I pray that you bind us together in your name and then pull us close to your heart as we worship you now.
So hard to see it. Took me so long to believe it, that you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve, and you take the broken things and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. Crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. Now I can finally see it. It took me so long to receive it. Let all the strife and cease. This is my victory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. place undefeated with the one who has conquered it all. Oh, you've conquered it all. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority Jesus has given me. When I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority Jesus has given me. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority Jesus has given me. When I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority Jesus has given me. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won, I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated by the power of your name. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated with the one who has conquered it all. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, the treasures that fade, they're never enough. Then you came along, put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn boats into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing, nothing is better than you. Oh, what a Savior. Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh what a Savior. Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. Oh, come to the altar. The Father's arms are open wide. Forgiveness was bought with the precious blood of, oh, what a Savior. Isn't He wonderful? Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Bow down before Him, for He is Lord of all. Sing hallelujah, Christ is risen. Oh, how high would I climb mountains if the mountains were where you hide? Oh, how far I'd scale the valleys if you grace the other side. Oh, how long have I chased rivers from lowly seas to where they rise, against the rush of grace descending from the source of its supply. Oh, in the highlands and the heartaches, you're neither more or less inclined. Oh, I would search and stop at nothing. You're just not that hard to find. I will praise you on the mountain. I will praise you when the mountain's in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valley all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartaches all the same. Oh, 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 how far beneath your glory does your kindness extend the path, from where your feet rest on the sunrise to where you sweep the sinners past. Oh, how fast would you come running if just to shadow me through the night? Trace my steps through all my failures and walk me out the other side. For who could dare ascend that mountain, that valleyed hill called Calvary, but for the one I call Good Shepherd, who like a lamb was slain for me. Oh, I will praise you on the mountains. I will praise you when the mountain's in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. I will praise you in the valleys all the same. No less God within the shadows, no less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartaches all the same. Oh, oh, see now, wherever I walk through, wherever I am, your name could move mountains. Wherever I stay, and if ever I walk through the valley of death, I'll see through the shadows my song of ascent. Wherever I walk through, wherever I am, your name can move mountains. Wherever I stand, wherever I walk through the valley of death, I'll see through the shadows my song of ascent, my song of ascent. Oh, my song of ascent. Oh, oh, and from the gravest of all valleys come the pastures we call grace, a mighty river flowing upwards from a deep but empty grave. And I will praise you on the mountains. I will praise you in the mountains in my way. You're the summit where my feet are. So I will praise you in the valleys or the same. No less God within the shadows. No less faithful when the night leads me astray. You're the heaven where my heart is. In the highlands and the heartaches all the same. The heartaches all the same.
Father, just thank you that your love is completely inescapable. That you find us where we are, that we only need to turn our attention to you to have comfort and hope and peace that is not ours to take from our circumstances. But God, we thank you that you are a God that is so much bigger than each and every circumstance we find ourselves in. We thank you that we can completely just fall into all that you have to offer us. Thank you, Father. Amen. Just so wonderful to have that time to worship together. And in a spirit of continuing to worship, we have some details up behind us on how you can tithe. And we thank you so much for how you partner with us and how we're trying to reach and love the city as a community. For those of you who have children with you and don't know what to do with them while we go into our message part of the service, we can invite you please to email Elzan at otc.org.za, and she will add you to a mailing list which you can then access from next Sunday going forward.
Speaking of the sermon that's coming up, Lutz is going to be sharing a message with us which I'm really excited about. It's a kind of sequel or a part 2 to last Sunday's sermon, and so that might cause some of you to want to quickly go back and have a listen to it after this. And to that end, the podcasts are available. So that's one of the things we do. I know over Christmas we weren't able to update our feed for a week or two, but everything's up to date now. So you can find all the preachers that you may have missed towards the end of last year and then the beginning of this year as well. And that's Spotify, Apple, Google, all the normal places you'd get your podcasts from. You can get the church podcasts. And that's going to be particularly important coming up because, as you're aware, we're going to have to be online for a little while. I know everyone would have loved to be together in person, or potentially not everyone, but many were. Others potentially a little nervous of that still, which is fine. So the most loving thing to do, the most responsible thing to do, the most legal thing to do, the right thing to do is for us to get behind our president and to care for one another by committing once again to being an online church. I got a bit fatigued with screens, I'm sure many did. But let's just find within ourselves whatever excitement you did have for this year, because we're going to be working hard to make sure that the online stuff is better than it's ever been. And so that's a really good reason for you to join a life group as well. Life group membership makes online church experience so much better. You can end up part of the Zoom conversations, potentially in the WhatsApp banter about the service that's just happened, the content we produce for life groups as well. And so at a moment where you might feel a little disconnected this year and you're worried that potentially church won't feel like it could have starting this year, please join a life group. That's one of the best ways for you to enjoy the online way that we're doing church for the next little while. And as soon as we can start to do in-person meetings, obviously we'll let you know. The other thing to say on the online front is that Off the Cuff starts tonight. So that's our evening service that has a slightly more youth-orientated feel, or sort of young adults-orientated feel, but it's for everyone. And those are going to be really great. So you can join us again this evening for Off the Cuff. I think those are all the things I had to say, Nats.
Yeah, I think that we can also give you a number of invitations that you could email info@otc about, and these are them. The first is Get Connected, which is an evening that you can join on Zoom to find out more about Olive Tree, who we are, what we do, some of our beliefs, and it will really help you to work out whether this is the best church for you to kind of sign up to in terms of having a spiritual family. Then the next is Discovery course, which is an incredible course also offered on Zoom at the moment, which helps you to work out your spiritual gifts and to work out how you're uniquely wired to bring about God's kingdom around you. So I really encourage doing the Discovery course. I know people who do it kind of once a year because as we grow in our journey, things also change and we get more interested in other areas. And so it's valuable to do whether you've done it before or not. Then the next is Alpha. We ran an incredible Alpha towards the back end of last year, and I think we had about 80, 90 people.
I think even 100 at one point. It was amazing. Really
it was an incredible, it's new material. I said, I'm sure everybody who knows me has heard it. I'm an absolute alphaholic. I think it's the most incredible course. And it's new material, it's fresh material, yet with all the same old
it actually
valuable
works,
truths.
And it works really well on Zoom, actually, of everything. In some ways, maybe even better on Zoom than it would in person because you can be a little more yourself. If you would be watching Netflix, you might as well be watching those excellent videos and chatting with others about them.
Yes, and they really are the kind of conversations that you just feel so much going on in your spirit. You could barely go to sleep at night. You kind of want to read and research and ask more questions. It's absolutely invigorating. So we really encourage the Alpha course. And then finally, premarital. For those of you who are maybe you've met somebody or maybe you know that this is somebody and you'd like to work out what marriage could look like and go through some really valuable material that could set you up for the best possible marriage. We'll be starting a premarital on the 8th of Feb. And again, that will be on Zoom. So for all 4 of these courses that are running, you can email info@otc.org.za and they'll add you to those courses.
Yeah. I should have actually mentioned that if you would like to host an Alpha group or host a life group, then we'd love to hear from you as well. If you're feeling like this year is a year you want to really give as opposed to just receive, then those are 2 great ways that you can use your ability to just host a conversation. Right, speaking of conversations, I'm really excited for what Lutz is about to share with us. I love this young man's mind. He's sharp and has looked at some of the stuff that we discussed last week. Job, the sovereignty of God, these difficult questions about whether God can be relied upon and what to do with difficult times. And Lutz is coming with his perspective on those and some other texts, which I just really can't wait to hear. So this sermon is called God Knows, I think in an optimistic way, but we're going to hear from Lutz if that's good news or bad news. Would you please join us in giving him your full attention?
How's it, everyone? It's so good to be with you guys. On the other side of the year, compliments to the season, happy 2021. I was actually reading a meme just recently and someone said, if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to be the first to say it because I can see you're all nervous. 2021 is going to be my year. And he was like at the most smug face pouring himself a drink. And I think it really takes a brave person to claim after the year we've had last year that 2021 is going to be your year. But I still pray right now that your holiday season was good. I pray it was great. I pray that all the messages about peace and everything that we spoke about on the other side of the year came to fruition in your life and that you've been on a journey with that. If it's been difficult, I just want to say that I completely empathize with you. And I still pray right now that God could give you the power and the peace to keep getting up and to keep moving forward, to keep having the courage to believe in Him and to keep fighting. I know that for us, we were lucky that right before the president's announcements, we'd already made arrangements to be somewhere else. And so I had a pretty pleasant crossing over up in the Drakensberg with a very small group of friends. If you were in Cobham at the time, I'm so sorry for the noise we made. Yes, it was fun. But I'm aware that it wasn't like that for everyone. And so if your experience hasn't been the same, I really, really pray right now that 2021 is completely different. There's also something else that happened because as good as the new year was, just that day, it was cool. We got to hike a little bit and see some incredible stuff. And we all got that day just sold us dreams for the next year. And even though we were nervous to say it or didn't have the courage to say it out loud, we all had hoped to some degree that this year would be different. That somehow just the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and a whole new chapter would start. And if I could compare it to anything, it felt like, what can I say? Those failed videos you watch of baby reveals, where everyone gets super excited and the balloon goes up and the father's meant to shoot or something, and either he gets it and bust and there's nothing, or there's like a one-tone color, or this thing that was meant to blow up and smoke just goes, and it felt like that. Because as quickly as we were excited about the new year, the sober reality came over us that actually not much has changed. And so with that in mind, I had to make a really conscious decision about what I was going to speak about today. I know that when Paul spoke last week, he said that he's going to have a deep, deep message. And then this week we'll go back to happy and normal, but that's not the case, unfortunately. Actually, I hope it is. I hope what I have to bring is somewhat encouraging to you. But I'm very aware of the reality that we're in right now. That the suffering has turned into more suffering. The sickness has turned into more sickness. The anxiety has been raised. And it sort of feels like deja vu of the beginning when people started getting laid off from work and all the rest of that stuff. I think it would be careless of me to give you a message that sold you dreams. To give you a prosperity gospel right now is probably not the best thing for me to do. Now, I'm not going to go as deep as Paul went. Paul went so incredibly deep. I've watched his message 3 times just trying to get my head around it. But what I loved about it so much is that he spoke such genuine thoughts. He just spoke his heart and the hearts of his friends and their experience. And hopefully I can do a little bit of the same today. But I'm going to use one specific story. I'm just going to tell a story. It's not my own story. And just up front and for the record, I'm not telling this story to make light of what you may be going through or to wash it down to a cliche. That's not what I want to do. But I really think that there's a powerful message here. So I've been reading the book of Job, and that's the book that we're going to dive into. Paul mentioned it last week, and what I didn't want to do is go contradict what he had to say or anything like that. But I also didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so I took on this challenge to speak on the book of Job. And while I've been trying to work it out and wrestle with it, it's just revealed some things to me, and hopefully those things can be helpful to how you fight your battles in the season. And here's why I wanted to speak about this message specifically, is that, as I've mentioned and have made no secret of, life is really difficult at the moment. And so first thing is that I don't want to sell you dreams. I don't want to lie to you. I don't want to give you a false gospel, but I also want to give you a message that can prepare how you fight your battles. I really, really believe that if we can get these 2 truths that I'm going to speak about today, if we can get those principles and start to work on them in our lives, that this year can be different. And I haven't worked out the words to articulate what I'm trying to say, but there's this relationship between faith and wisdom that I'm trying to work out. And as you know about the book of Job is taken from the wisdom literature. It's one of the books on wisdom, and it speaks about God's wisdom, but it also gives us a little bit of insight into what human wisdom is. And this confronts the question of suffering, which we're all very familiar with at the moment to some degree, some more than others. And so without further ado, I'm going to tell you the story, and I'm going to paraphrase quite a bit because it's a lot to read. So in the beginning of this book of Job, we're introduced to the character of Job, and Job is introduced to us as this very noble, good man. He honors God, and he's upright, and he looks after his community. He's just a picture of a good person who deserves nothing but the best, someone you would wish got nothing but the best. And then we're taken from this guy who's this upright man from an unknown place called Uz, which is in no particular place in time. And I think that's intentional. When you read the book of Job, you don't want to get lost in the semantics about where this happened. Is this real? This and that and that and the other. And then we're taken to another scene. And now in another scene, we're in a heavenly court. And God is having his weekly address, his own weekly family meeting. And everyone is, and these angels are giving accounts of everything. And Satan is there too. And Satan in this story is called the accuser. And so he comes forward and he accuses, he doesn't accuse Job. He just says, God asks him, where have you been? And he's like, I've been throughout the earth, back and forth through the earth, looking for whatever he was looking for. And so he gives that account. And then God says to him, have you considered my servant Job? And begins to brag about Job. And this is at this point, I begin feeling sorry for Job. And I pray right now that God, you don't brag about me and say, have you considered Luther? Because what happens next is just the worst. So then the accuser accuses him, says, oh, he only praises you, or he only worships you, or he's only that good because you bless him. You see, he's got everything going for him. And then God says, that's not the point. And then the devil says, let me test him. And he goes on to test him, but God says, you can test him, but you can't take his life. And I think they repeat this process a couple of times. And in each step, just true to the character of Job, he does not rebuke God. He doesn't say anything to God or mock him. He's just like the most humble person in suffering. But the suffering gets worse. And the suffering gets worse. And I would describe it as I've described it before. If you've ever, and maybe you can relate with this in this season. Once upon a time, I was swimming there at Suncoast, and there was a bank in the distance, and it looked closer than it was. And I started to swim towards it, and it looked smaller than it was. And as I got closer, this bank got bigger. And as I started getting tired and having nowhere to go and nowhere to put my feet. And as I get my feet onto the sandbank, more waves, more wash off. And eventually I had like this headache, and I was spinning. And Job's suffering feels a little bit like that. As he's accepted the first thing, and as he's come to terms with it and made peace and said, well, it doesn't matter if I've lost my stuff. I came into this world with it. I'm without it. I can leave without it. I'm okay. And then another wave. And then another. And as he stops for air, another wave. And eventually the suffering is overwhelming. Eventually the suffering is so bad that it affects him physically, but he's just can't die. And his own wife says, why would you maintain your dignity? Why wouldn't you just curse God and die? And he tells her, stop speaking foolishness. This man is a good man, but eventually his friends hear about his suffering, and they go to see him, and it's so bad. It's so atrocious that they sit down next to him, and they say nothing for 7 days as his skin is falling apart, and he's using like porcelain to scrape off the scabs, and like he's been hit by the earth. Everything is against him. And so he just sits there quietly for 7 days and says nothing. And then we go on to verse 4, and Job speaks. And when he breaks his silence, man, Job goes into a tirade. And this part of the book, first of all, I just wanted to highlight, PS side note, if you ever quote the book of Job, be careful when you quote this part of the book, because it's like a poetic dialogue of suggestions. They're reasoning with each other and trying to understand and make sense of the suffering as humans do. And so they do what we normally do, and they start to, he makes an accusation, and he's got like a basic premise here, is that his argument is that I'm innocent. I haven't done anything wrong. I've been upright and steadfast. And so because of that, God must not operate the world on a strict principle of justice, or else he himself is not just, or that's his conclusion. It's either God doesn't operate the world on a strict principle of justice, or he himself is not just. And he goes through this pattern and dialogue 3 times, and his friends on the other hand are saying, God is innocent. I mean, God is who he is. He is just. He does operate the world on a strict principle of justice. You must have done something wrong. And that's the beginning place where us as people as well go to a place where we try to say, I must have done something wrong. What did I do to deserve this? And don't get me wrong, when sometimes when you make bad decisions, bad things happen. Bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people. There's things that we can figure, there's just things we don't know, and they're trying to figure that out, and so they're discussing it, and they try to lay accusations about his sons, about his family, about him and the things that he must have done, and all along, Job is just going, I have done nothing wrong, I am innocent. I don't deserve this. Why is it happening to me? And he carries on questioning the thing of justice. And they have this back and forth. Eventually, Job gets fed up with the friends. He says he's lost peace. And you have to understand that the place Job is in is like the friend that Paul was talking about last week. The whole fabric of his reality has been torn apart. Because on one side, he's suffering so intensely that he cursed the day he was born. He wishes he would die. And on the other hand, he wants to believe in God. He wants to believe the things he's grown up and been taught to believe about God. He wants to believe in the character of God, but he can't reconcile it with his suffering. And so in one sentence, he'll say like the most blasphemous thing, and then take it back in the next sentence because he's so conflicted by this thing. And he has this wrestle, but he doesn't acknowledge the friends anymore because he gets so fed up that he takes his case to God. He demands to speak to God himself. And just before this section of the thing is, is brought to a cap, we're introduced to one more character. And just understand that the first three, they basically represent us. They also represent the thinking of the time. Often when suffering happens, we try to make sense of it by finding something to blame, something to point at, or questioning why it's happening. And we don't always get a reason. And the third person comes in, and I think he's a little bit younger, but his name is Elihu. And he comes in, and he speaks about the other three, and then he puts down his piece. Now, Elihu's response is a little bit more sophisticated, and it pushes a little bit past that, well, you must have done something wrong. God is just, you're guilty. That's why this is happening. And he pushes past that a little bit, and he says, God is just. He does operate the world on a strict principle of justice. But, he gave us the apologetics argument. Sometimes things happen because people are evil. Sometimes this happens for this. Sometimes pain is a warning so that you don't make a mistake in the future. He makes all those kind of suggestions, and like I said, they're a little bit more sophisticated than the other guys. But at this point, Job is not even interested. He doesn't even acknowledge him, and then the chapter is brought to a close. And just like that, we've exhausted, I love the phrase they use in this video they were watching, but they'd exhausted all the resources or all the capacity of human understanding in their attempts to figure out why this thing is happening, and they couldn't get an answer. We move on to the next part, and this is the part I get so excited about that I wanted to rush to. Because in this next part, it's not what we expect. God comes in, and you'd think he would come in there and he would just give Job the most straightforward, simple answer. And Job, and everything would be all right. But we never find out an answer to Job's suffering. But God does something else that God is in the habit of doing. He opens up a window for Job into himself. And it's a bit of an intense window. It's like an interrogation, because he starts to ask him. He pulls him in and takes him on a virtual tour of the universe, and he starts to ask him, where were you when I did this? Where were you when I set the foundations of the earth? Do you know what yardstick I used to measure it and to make sure that you're the right distance from this and that? Where were you when I told the waves this far and no further? Have you ever been to the depths of the sea and know where the water comes from? Were you there when I set the weather into motion? Do you know where the darkness comes from? And can you tell it to go away, or can you set it in its place? And the whole time God is doing that, he's basically just showing him something that I think Job had been so immersed in his suffering that he hadn't considered. Or maybe he had, but he'd forgotten. God just keeps showing him who he is. And he carries on with this, and he posts and says, do you understand anything about the constellation? Can you pull down Orion's belt? Can you set it into motion? I'm going to add my own little pieces here, because the world is so fascinating that we wake up every morning and we don't even consider the universe. We feel safe enough to just walk out of the house and go on with our lives. Though there are thousands of stars and thousands of things we don't understand out there, we don't even consider them, because God has built the world so perfectly and so safely that we trust that everything is going to be the same as when we went to sleep the day before in terms of the universe. Did you know that, I was watching this just the other day, that the volume or the water quantity in the ocean not just has a relationship with the moon in terms of controlling gravity, but it also has a counter drag that causes the earth to spin at the exact rate that it needs to for us to have the days that we have. We're like the perfect distance from the sun, a meter closer or a meter further. One is frozen, one is burnt. God has set this world into like an incredible, incredible motion. But I'm going to move further again, because he starts to boast about animals, and I'm wondering, God, what are you doing here? What are you trying to say? But he starts to boast about animals, and he asks, do you know when to bring the cub out of hiding? The bear needs cubs out of hibernation. A bear goes for a whole season without eating and just sleeps and nests its babies. And just on time, every time it knows when to come out, and they know how to survive. I see incredible things. And he says, do you know about the mountain goat and its pattern? I'm so fascinated by the mountain goat, because the greatest feats I've ever seen any human do is do that free solo. I don't know what his name is, but outside of that human, there is no human being that can skirt a mountain the way a mountain goat can. Without even thinking about it, without the ropes and harnesses and the powder, this thing just runs up and down mountains. It stands in grace, and it's a goat with hooves. That just speaks to the splendor, the bigness, the wisdom of God. He says, an ostrich is so foolish. It's so stupid that it gives birth to its eggs on the floor. It doesn't consider that it might trample them or they might get stolen. But when that thing runs, even though it can't fly, when it takes off, it'll make horse and rider look foolish. God just carries on and on and on with this. I'm going to add one more example. And this just happened in my room last night. Last night I was supposed to go to bed at around 8:30. I got into bed, I did a little bit of work, and a little old mosquito came into my room. I went to bed after midnight, chasing one mosquito, who God put the instinct in, as annoying as it is, to know where to hide, to know to go out, to go into the deepest, darkest corners of my room when the lights come on and come back out as I'm starting to snooze into my sleep. God knows all of that. He put all of that into motion. And I know that in the middle of suffering, it sounds a little bit, what can I say, inconsiderate, but this is the first thing that I need you to know. Or the point is that God is massive, beyond our comprehension. God is huge. That's not for nothing. I don't want to say because God is big and mighty and sovereign, all-knowing and all-wise, we just go, Lord knows. And I don't know if you've seen it, or if I mentioned in the beginning, but that's the name of this message. It's God knows. But that's not the energy that I want you to have walking out of this message. I don't want you to just go, God knows, because really we don't understand some of these things. But what is God doing here when He speaks to him? I think the point that God is making is what's said in Isaiah 55, verse 8 to 9, when He goes, and it's not going to be on the screen, but He says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my thoughts higher than your thoughts, and so are my ways higher than yours. God is infinitely bigger, infinitely wiser, infinitely more sovereign than we can ever imagine. And the mistake or the travesty would be to be so immersed in our suffering, not because our suffering is light, not because it's momentary, that's not what I'm trying to say, but because God is so much bigger than the thing we see from where we stand, than the limited range of our understanding. And so in all of your suffering, the first thing that I want you to know is who God is. God does this again. There's a man in the Bible. I said that God has got a habit of doing this, but there's a man in the Bible. His name is Elijah, and he has basically his best day. And straight after that, he gets a threat, and it turns into his worst day. And in that moment, he takes off. He runs an ungodly distance into a mountainside. And I've always wondered about this because God tells him to go out onto the mountainside. And maybe this is just my optimistic brain creating a story for myself, but He makes him go out, and then He sends a big wind, He sends an earthquake, and then He sends a fire sweeping along the mountainside, and then after it, a gentle whisper. But I feel like God is saying there what He was saying to Job, is that earth, wind, and fire are under my control. I made this. I'm wise enough to keep control of it. I know. I, as God, know. I'm not talking about myself, but I'm talking about God Himself. He knows. And so He doesn't address Elijah for his suffering, but He shows him or reminds him who He is. There's another place where His servant, actually, who He's blessed with 1,000 over, comes out into the city and they're surrounded. And He says to His servant, open his eyes so that he may see. May we open our eyes that we may see reality, that God is far bigger, far more mighty than any army that can come against us, and that He has our back. I need you that in every moment of suffering to get behind God and know who He is. The story doesn't stop there. And this is the response after Job's global tour of the cosmos and everything in it, fascinating and small and big and everything in between. I would also advise that you go on your own virtual, just watch stuff, watch Planet Earth, watch that. It just absolutely blows my mind how God has set everything into motion. You cannot help but be in awe of who He is. And like I said before, I don't want this awe to be an awe that makes you sit and like, oh, well, God knows. That's not the purpose. I want that God knows to be a more optimistic, bigger, hopeful God knows, because you know who God is. But Job responds, and this is the perfect response to what he's just seen. It's a response of humility. He's absolutely humbled. and repentance. And he says this in Job 42 verse 1 to 4. He says, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscured my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. In verse 5 he says, my ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. He has this watershed moment where he remembers again just who God is, and that it almost deals with the question of suffering peripherally. That's a big word. But anyways, God doesn't stop there. I've got the summary here that I wrote down that I thought was the best summary of the book of Job, but it says something like this. It says, the book of Job does not unlock the puzzle of human suffering. We will not always understand why things are happening. We will not always understand why suffering happens to good people. We don't get that answer. Even I, as a pastor, I have to come to a place where I've had to go sometimes, I just don't know. And then it goes on to say this in this verse that I wrote. But there's an invitation to trust God's wisdom when we encounter suffering. Beyond that, the call is to bring our pain and our grief to God and trust that He actually cares and knows what He is doing. And trust that He actually cares and knows what He's doing. That's why I say God pushes past that, because in the epilogue, when we read in the end of this, God gives down hands down some kind of judgment to the three brothers, the three friends, Elihu and Job, and He actually judges Job as right. When He judges Job, He says, you spoke correctly of me, they did not. Even though they were trying to defend God in some sense, they couldn't. Even though they tried to use human logic to explain a much bigger principle that we possibly couldn't understand, but in a positive way, they were wrong. And God has said to Job, even though Job skirted the line of blasphemy and accusing God of being unjust and being all of these other things, God said He spoke correctly of me. Because God doesn't just want you to understand that He's big and mighty and sovereign and that everything is in His hands and that the governments of the world and that the governments of heaven are in His control and in His domain or that He created. He doesn't want you to just sit there and go, oh, well, God knows. He wants you to know that though He is that, He's invited you into it. He's invited you into some promises. God still makes a beautiful picture for us to see in Scripture that says, come along on this journey. Come with me. It says in Psalm 8 verse 4 to 8, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the sons of man that you care for him? Though God is that big and mighty thing that we can barely fathom, He cares about us. And He said that no person made that philosophy up. He reached out to us and He's going, I care about you. He's called us to cast our cares on Him. And so in the same sense here, He invites Job and he commends him for wrestling with him. He says, I commend you for your honesty and for your courage to wrestle with me. There's a picture that brings the story into full circle where Jacob wrestles with God. It says Jacob wrestled with God until the break of dawn, and just before the sun, and he held on to him and said, I would not let you go until you bless me. Israel became known as well, their name means he who wrestled with God. After Jacob got that blessing. And we've been invited into that now as Christians, as people of God. We've been invited, another word for wrestle is intimacy. We've been invited into intimacy with God. And if it was just a relationship of God is sovereign, and we just go, oh, well, He knows. It's kind of like an olden day relationship where we just submit, where we just accept that the husband will do what he does and the wife is going to do this part of the doing. It's not like that. God has called us into an intimacy. He's invited us into a relationship with Him. And He's actually made a way through Jesus, going, I am the way, the truth, and the light. No one comes to the Father except through me. But we get to come to the Father. We get to have intimacy with Him. And intimacy, but hear me correctly, I've come to learn this just in the first 2 years of relationship, is that if you want to connect with your partner, if you want to connect with someone that you want to be intimate with, you have to be able to open yourself up. You have to be able to speak honestly and confidently. You have to be able to hear each other out. And that's what God has invited us into. And so as we walk into this year called 2021, with all the mysteries that it holds, with all the potential for suffering and chaos and danger, can we get those 2 points? First, the understanding of just how big, how mighty, how majestic, how awesome, how wise God himself is. And then can we have the faith or the courage or the wisdom, whatever you want to call it, to always remember that, or to keep looking in that direction when we fight our battles. To fight our battles from that position, knowing who God is. And then the second thing is that can we remember that God cares deeply for us, that in every moment he is there with us and fighting for us. May that be the posture with which you fight the battles of 2021. And I don't know what they hold, but in the cliche Christian term, I know who holds them. On that bombshell, I'm going to pray. And I just pray that you guys also have a very awesome and blessed 2021. So let's pray. Father God, thank you so much for who you are. And I just pray that day after day, in the middle of our suffering, in the middle of our valleys and at our highest points, that you would keep showing us more of you. That we would get a picture of your splendor, your wisdom, your knowledge, your understanding. And may that help us to trust you. Thank you for an invitation in this book to trust you, to trust that you're wise enough to govern the world, and to trust that you know everything that's going on. And God, I just pray that you would also be so close to us, that we would feel intimacy with you. That would be the thing that holds us in the middle of every single storm in life, every single hard moment, every single easy moment, every single celebration, every single victory. God, I just pray that in all of it, you would be right there with us, in relationship and intimacy, holding us. Finally, Jesus, I thank you so much that you would die on a cross to make that a reality. Thank you that you would lay down your life, that whoever believes in you could have access to God, ungoverned access, unlimited access all the time. We lift your name up. We love you so much. And in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And to reiterate, I just pray that you guys have an awesome and blessed 2021. See you guys soon.